There's a crib in my guest room, still assembled, still untouched. The mattress is firm. The sheets are sky blue with tiny white bears. I never moved it. Not after everything. I just closed the door and stopped opening it. The house is too quiet now. Even the floorboards feel ashamed when they creak. I haven't told anyone this, but some nights I sleep on the floor next to that door. Not inside, just outside. I don't know why. Maybe to punish myself. Maybe to remember what I left behind. Or maybe because part of me is waiting for the sounds to return. The little grunts. The rustling of baby blankets. The midnight cries I used to pretend annoyed me. But none of that's coming back. Not after what I did. It wasn't my idea. Not at first. People think choices like mine are made in a single moment. But they're not. They happen like a faucet dripping. One poisonous drop at a time. And the first drop? It didn't come from me. It came from a voice on speakerphone. "I've made arrangements," she said. "All you have to do is follow through." That voice belonged to my mother. And like the coward I am, I listened. I left my wife. I left my twins. And I left the truth buried behind 100 polite lies. The arrangement was simple. She wanted to relocate me for 3 months away from the chaos. She said I needed to get clarity, that I was drowning and didn't even know it. And she had already done the paperwork. Booked the apartment. Closed the accounts. Shut down my credit card and replaced it with one she controlled. She said it was for my own good. The night before I left, I stood at the nursery door and watched my son stretch in his sleep like a cat. My daughter had one sock half off and the other leg tucked under her belly. I didn't kiss them goodbye. I didn't even turn on the night light. I just whispered, "I'll be back soon." But I didn't come back. Because when I tried, things were already different. The locks had been changed. And Isabel had disappeared. I stood there with my palm on the doorknob, waiting for the click that never came. My key, our key, didn't fit anymore. For a second, I thought maybe I grabbed the wrong one. Maybe it was just stiff. But I knew deep down what this meant. The lock was changed. I hadn't even been gone 90 days. I didn't knock. I didn't want the neighbors to see me like that. Like a man in exile, trying to get back into a kingdom he'd willingly abandoned. I stepped back, stared at the second-floor window where May and Ellis used to press their tiny hands against the glass, and I realized this wasn't my home anymore. 3 days later, I received a manila envelope by courier. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't warm. It was cold, clinical, and printed on thick, textured paper like it belonged in a courtroom. Isabel had filed for legal separation, and the letter wasn't just from her. It was from her attorney, a woman named Francine Holt. She might as well have come from central casting, blunt, experienced, and utterly terrifying. She wrote that Isabel had established a safe and stable environment for herself and the children, and that, due to my voluntary absence, all visitation and custody matters would be handled through mediation if I initiated proceedings within 30 days. If not, Isabel would proceed with full custody requests. It hit me harder than anything my mother had said, because I knew Isabel wasn't bluffing. She never played games with the kids. She never used threats. If she said she was moving on without me, it meant she already had. Emotionally, at least. I tried calling her. No answer. I texted. Nothing. I even tried going through her sister, Brielle, who always liked me and once called my mother a suburban dictator. But when I left a voicemail asking if I could at least talk to the twins on their birthday, she texted back 2 words, "Too late." The worst part? My mother told me to stay strong. She said this was good, that Isabel was revealing her true colors, and that soon I'd have a clean slate. No more chaos. No more legal ties. She even sent me a bottle of wine with a note that read, "Onward and upward." I threw it in the trash. In that night, I sat in a rental apartment alone with the lights off, replaying the last phone call I had with Isabel. It wasn't even a fight. It was empty. I remember her voice cracking as she asked, "Are you really doing this, Clark? Just disappearing?" And I remember lying, saying, "It's temporary. I just need to clear my head." That was the last time I heard her voice. Until the broadcast. It was a Sunday morning like any other. My head was pounding from lack of sleep, and I turned on the TV for background noise while making coffee. I wasn't paying attention until I heard a phrase that stopped my hand mid-pour. Young mother of twins abandoned during postpartum recovery. I looked up. there she was, Isabel, on national television. It wasn't a dramatic show. It was a daytime feature about resilience, highlighting mothers who had overcome extreme circumstances. She was one of 3 women seated on the stage. She looked calm, healthier, different. She wore a deep green dress I'd never seen before, and her hair was tied back in a way that made her look not like the woman I left, but the one I married. Then came a question from the host. What would you say to the father of your children if he's watching this right now? The studio went silent. Isabel looked down for a second. Then she looked straight into the camera and said something that made me sit down on the floor like I'd been kicked in the chest. I'd say thank you for leaving, because your silence taught me how loud I could be without you. That's when I realized she wasn't just surviving. She was telling our story, without me in it. And suddenly, the house, the nursery, the guilt, they all collapsed into one brutal truth. I hadn't just left them behind. I'd erased myself from the version of life where I mattered. After the broadcast, something in me cracked, and not in the poetic, reflective way people talk about in memoirs. I mean really cracked, like a windshield spidering under pressure. I spent the rest of the day pacing, rewinding the segment over and over until the host's voice started echoing in my dreams. That night, I didn't sleep. Not a second. My body was still, but my head was running laps around a life I no longer had access to. I kept thinking of May and Ellis. Were they speaking yet? What were their voices like? Did they remember me? Did Isabel ever show them photos of me? Or did she do the smart thing and erase the man who bailed? The next morning, I opened my email to find over 70 unread messages. Not from Isabel, of course. These were promotions, bills, notifications I'd been ignoring while spiraling in my rental purgatory. But one message stood out. The sender was anonymous, just a burner address. The subject line read, "You're not the only one who saw the show." I hovered over it for 5 minutes before opening it. The email was short. No greeting, no context. Just a Dropbox link with a caption. You deserve to know what really happened. Now, every cell in my body screamed, don't click it. But I did. Because of course I did. That's what cowards do when they've lost everything. They hope pain will make them feel something again. The folder contained 3 video files. No te me stamps. No taites. I clicked the first. It was security footage from my own front door. The camera angle was off-center, like it had been tilted manually. I saw Isabel walk out, holding Ellis in one arm and a bag of diapers in the other. She looked exhausted, but determined. She was met at the curb by my mother. Janine. The footage had no sound, but I didn't need audio to understand the tension. Isabel tried to speak. My mother raised a hand to stop her. Then she pointed at something, probably the stroller, and started shaking her head. Isabel looked down. Her shoulders slumped. Then she turned and walked back inside, clutching Ellis tightly. That alone would have been enough to ruin my morning. But the second video was worse. It showed Janine again, but this time she was inside the house. My house. In the nursery. Alone. She walked up to the crib and stood there, motionless. Then she reached down, picked up a tiny blue onesie from the corner of the room, and held it to her face. Not lovingly, like a keepsake. No, it was different. It felt calculated, like she was memorizing something. She took a photo of the crib, then the closet, then the bottle rack. Then she pulled a document from her purse. Something printed. She laid it on the dresser, snapped a picture, and walked out. I didn't understand what I was seeing until the third video. The third video wasn't footage. It was a clip from a courtroom. A deposition based on the setup. And the woman being questioned? My mother. Her voice was sharp, calm, but dripping with venom. She was answering questions about parental abandonment and support obligations. She wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself. The lawyer asked if she had ever tried to influence the parental decisions of her adult son. Her reply? Of course I did. He was too soft to make them on his own. When the clip ended, I closed my laptop and just stared at the blank screen, seeing my own pale reflection in it. I believed for months that I made a personal choice. That I left because I was broken, because I needed clarity, because I was scared. But now I realized I wasn't even the author of my own downfall. I was just a pawn in someone else's blueprint. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel guilt. I felt anger, but the kind that simmers low and quiet, like a fuse no one notices until it's too late. I didn't leave the apartment for 2 days after watching those videos. I sat on the couch like I was strapped to it, alternating between guilt and fury, shame and a strange new clarity. My mom didn't just manipulate me, she planned it, documented it, archived it like a criminal keeping trophies. And now I had proof. But I also had a problem. I had no idea what to do with it. What do you do when you realize your mother orchestrated the collapse of your family? Do you confront her? Do you tell your ex-wife? Do you try to fix what's broken? Or just sit there, watching your life rot like spoiled fruit in a fridge you keep forgetting to clean? But fate, or whatever version of it controls the lives of men like me, wasn't done. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text. A letter. Handwritten. The return address was a hospital just outside Asheville. My first reaction was that something had happened to one of the twins. My heart nearly exploded. I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was a folded page and a printed birth certificate. My son's. But this wasn't the original copy. This was a newly issued amended version. The father's name field? Blank. No signature. No mention of me. No trace of my existence. It felt like someone had poured acid over my name and scrubbed it out. The note inside was short, written in clean, careful handwriting. It wasn't from Isabel. It wasn't from her lawyer. It wasn't signed at all. Just 4 chilling words. Now you are nothing. I held that certificate like it was a bomb about to go off in my hands. Was this real? Could Isabel really have removed my name? Did she want to erase me? Or was this my mother again? Tightening the noose she tied months ago, I drove to the hospital the next morning. I didn't make an appointment. I didn't call ahead. I just walked into records with the document, my driver's license, and the kind of pale desperation that makes nurses whisper behind clipboards. A clerk named Brianna helped me. She was kind but cautious. She scanned the birth certificate, looked me up in their system, and frowned. I can't give you full details, she said gently, but there's a note on the file that might explain part of this. She turned her screen slightly, just enough for me to glimpse the words that broke me open like a shattered egg. Paternity challenged. Parental designation pending. I don't know how long I stood there staring at those words. I think Brianna said something, maybe even asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. The room spun. My lungs forgot how to breathe. Paternity challenged? There had never been any question. Isabel and I had been together the entire pregnancy. No separación. No suspicion. No silence. Unless this was planted, unless someone submitted something. Someone with legal access. Someone with motivation. Someone like my mother. I drove straight to her house. No warning. No call. Just rage on 4 wheels. She opened the door like she was expecting me. I wonder when you'd come storming in, she said, smugly stepping aside like she was doing me a favor. Clark, sit down. You look flushed. I'm not sitting, I snapped. You filed something, didn't you? At the hospital. You challenged my rights. You tried to wipe me from my own kids' lives. She walked toward her liquor cabinet, pouring herself something brown over 2 perfect cubes of ice. Then she looked at me, not like a mother, but like a CEO settling a deal. I corrected a mistake, she said flatly. I protected you from decades of destruction. You weren't ready for that life, and you know it. You walked away for a reason. I just made sure there was no going back. You should be thanking me. You have no idea what you've done, I whispered. She smiled. You're wrong. I know exactly what I've done. And so do the people who matter now. I left without another word. I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove to a motel off the highway. One of those places that smell like air freshener and cheap decisions. And that night, as I lay there staring at a flickering ceiling fan, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just erased from my children's documents. I was being erased from their memory. If I didn't act, if I didn't fight, my twins would grow up with no trace of me. No bedtime stories. No Sunday pancakes. No guardado jokes. Nothing but a blank space where a father should have been. I didn't go home for 3 days. The motel was damp, the vending machine was broken, and the receptionist gave me the kind of look that said she'd seen too many men like me. Unshaved, slouched, pretending to be invisible. I didn't care. It was safer here, emotionally. At least no one expected anything from me in this place. Least of all myself. I spent the time writing letters I never intended to send. To May, to Ellis, even to Isabel. In one of them, I confessed that I once left a bottle warming too long and blamed her for it, just to avoid feeling like the worst parent. In another, I admitted that I'd lied when I told her my mother wasn't involved in our decisions. I never mailed a single one. I just tore them all up and flushed the pieces. But something changed on the morning of the fourth day. I was sitting in the public library, using the free Wi-Fi to scroll job listings and attorney directories. That's when a man sat down at the table across from me. He looked mid-50s, gray crew cut, cheap brown jacket. He didn't say anything right away, just opened a paperback and flipped a few pages. Then he looked up and said, "You're Clark Avery, right?" I froze. "Who's asking?" I replied, instinctively checking to see if my laptop was visible. "I used to work with your mother," he said, lowering his voice. "Back when she was still buying up retirement homes under shell corporations. You probably don't know about that part of her business." He slid an envelope across the table. Yellow, slightly warped by moisture, with no markings. I didn't touch it. "What is this?" "Proof," he said. "You're not the first person she's done this to. But you could be the last." "Why are you helping me?" I asked, trying not to show the shake in my hands. He didn't smile, didn't blink. "Because my sister lost custody of her daughter to a judge her mother had drinks with every Thursday. That girl's in boarding school now, doesn't even know she was adopted. Janine makes people disappear. But she made a mistake with you. She made it personal." And with that, he stood up and walked away. I watched him exit the building like he was going to the grocery store, not dropping nuclear information into the lap of a broken man in a hoodie. I didn't open the envelope right away. I left the library, walked 2 blocks, found a bench under a dead tree, and sat down. Then I ripped it open. Inside was a flash drive and 4 printed pages. The pages were emails. Emails between my mother and a private investigator. Most were time-stamped before the twins were even born. Subject lines like "dig deeper on Isabel" and "potential insurance policy." One email included photos, ones I'd seen before, the ones used to manipulate me into leaving. But they weren't surveillance shots. They were pulled from Isabel's private cloud storage, which meant my mother had access to her passwords. The flash drive, that was something else. It contained audio recordings. One of them was a phone call, a conversation between Janine and an unnamed attorney. She was laughing. "He's just soft enough to believe me," she said. "I give him another month before he signs over everything. He doesn't even ask questions." It's almost sad. I paused the recording halfway through. My stomach couldn't handle the rest. I now had undeniable proof that my mother orchestrated my removal, that she accessed personal accounts illegally, that she submitted false statements to the hospital and weaponized the legal system with surgical precision. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I had gone along with it. Willingly, blindly, pathetically, and I was still too much of a coward to knock on Isabel's door. Instead, I drove back to my rental. For the first time in weeks, I didn't avoid the nursery I'd built for the twins. I opened the door, sat on the floor, and stared at the empty crib like it might give me answers. But there were no answers in that room, only echoes. That night, I drafted an email to Isabel. It took 3 hours. I rewrote the subject line 14 times. I was about to hit send when my phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. "Turn on Channel 7. Now." I grabbed the remote. Channel 7 was local news. A segment was just starting. The title? "Whistleblower files complaint against prominent developer Janine Avery. Allegations of evidence tampering and parental fraud." And then, her face, my mother's face, splashed across the screen like a mugshot. I don't know how long I stared at the screen. Maybe 2 minutes. Maybe 20. Time didn't feel linear anymore. It bent and twisted in ways I couldn't follow. There was my mother standing in front of a courthouse, surrounded by flashing cameras and a wall of reporters. She wasn't in handcuffs. Not yet. But she wasn't in control anymore. The woman who had spent decades pulling strings from behind velvet curtains was finally standing in the spotlight and squinting. The anchor's voice was calm, but the words cut through me like glass. "Multiple whistleblower complaints have emerged accusing Janine Avery of falsifying legal documentation, interfering with child custody rulings, and leveraging financial influence over medical institutions in Tennessee and Georgia. They showed the screenshots, the emails, the surveillance photos, even played a snippet of the audio, the one I had just listened to the day before. She was caught, fully, undeniably caught. And in that moment, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindication. I felt cold, because her downfall didn't rewind the damage. It didn't unlock my old front door. It didn't put my name back on the birth certificate. It didn't lift me into my arms or make Ellis call me dad. All it did was confirm that I had stood beside a monster and smiled. By the next morning, the media storm had swallowed everything. My inbox exploded. Journalists found my number. Online forums started digging into my background. Some Reddit thread titled Clark Avery, victim or collaborator, had over 9,000 comments in 12 hours. They called me the quiet son, the obedient heir, the emotionally neutered partner. One blogger wrote, "If my mother tried to erase my children, I'd erase her first." But Clark just took a nap. They weren't wrong. I had let it happen. The only person who hadn't contacted me was Isabel. Until that night. I had just come back from buying bottled water when I saw her. In the parking lot, standing next to her car, arms folded, staring straight at me like she'd been waiting for days. She looked different. Not older, not colder, just quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after you've cried so much you can't remember what your own voice sounds like. She didn't move, just waited. Let me be the first to approach. That was always her way. I walked up slowly, like a man approaching a mirror he wasn't ready to face. She spoke first. "You saw it?" she asked. I nodded. Every minute. I thought maybe you'd run again. I looked down at my shoes. I did, inside my head, but I couldn't go far. She held out a folder. Thick, sealed with a black binder clip. "I didn't give this to the press," she said. "Even though I wanted to. Even though I had every reason to. But I didn't do this to ruin your life, Clark. I did this to protect our kids." I took the folder. It felt heavier than paper. "What is it?" "Everything," she said. "Every email. Every recording. Every statement your mother made under oath. But more importantly, every court document I filed to stop her." I swallowed. "You protected them, when I didn't." Her expression didn't change. "No, Clark. I protected them from both of you. That hurt more than any headline." She turned to leave, but I wasn't done. "Do you remember me?" She froze at her car door. Didn't turn around. Just said, May asked about the man in the photo by her crib. "Ellis thinks you're a firefighter." I didn't correct him. Then she got in and drove away. I stood there for a long time, holding the folder like it might burst into flames. The next morning, I didn't call a lawyer. I called a producer, the same one who'd interviewed Isabel on the morning show. I told her I wanted to talk, not to save my name, not to win sympathy, but because if I didn't tell my side, if I didn't tell their story, then the only voice my children would hear would be strangers online arguing about who their father used to be. And I needed them to know the truth, even if it was ugly, even if it made me look like the weakest man in America. I didn't sleep the night before the interview. I told the producer I wanted it live, no edits, no filters, no softening. I didn't want the safety of a carefully cut version. I didn't deserve safety. I deserved exposure. Whatever consequences came with that, I'd earned them 100 times over. They booked the slot for a Thursday morning, national syndication. Same studio where Isabel had spoken. Same backdrop. But this time, the chair wasn't flanked by comfort or applause. It stood alone, and so did I. The makeup woman asked if I wanted concealer under my eyes. I told her no. Let them see the tired. Let them see the hollow. As the cameras warmed up and the host reviewed the cue cards, I kept thinking of my twins. What would they think if they ever saw this? Would they feel pride? Disgust? Would they even recognize the man speaking as their father? The red light blinked on, and the host turned to me. "Clark Avery," she said, smiling like this was just another morning chat. "You've been silent through weeks of coverage. Today, you're here to speak. Why now?" I looked at her, then at the camera. Then I said the only thing I was sure of. Because silence is how I lost everything. A beat. Then the world stopped breathing. "I let my mother control my life," I said. "I let her convince me that my wife was a burden. That fatherhood was a trap. That disappearing was strength. I let her sign my name off things I should have protected with my life, like my children. The host's smile faded. She knew now that this wasn't going to be an easy segment. I watched from a distance as the woman I loved raised our children alone, while my mother deleted me from every document, every photo, and nearly every memory. I paused, and I let her. I thought of quitting right there, but I didn't. There's a file in my home. I continued. It contains audio recordings of my mother calling me soft, weak, predictable, and she was right. I was all of those things, but not because I was afraid of fatherhood, not because I doubted Isabel. I was weak because I chose comfort over courage. It chose inheritance over integrity. The studio was still. I could hear someone adjusting their mic behind the curtain. Someone whispered while off camera. The host leaned in. What do you want now, Clark? What's the outcome you're hoping for? I took a deep breath. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want to be applauded. I just want the truth out there. I want May and Ellis to know that their dad didn't disappear because he didn't love them. He disappeared because he was too broken to fight back. And because someone he trusted more than anyone else in the world manipulated him into thinking that walking away was noble. There was more I wanted to say. That I still sleep on the floor sometimes. That I kept the baby monitor connected, even though no sound ever comes through. That I listen to old voicemails just to hear Isabel's voice say my name like she used to. But I didn't say that. Instead, I closed with this. One day they'll see this. My children. Maybe when they're old enough to understand cruelty wrapped in kindness. Maybe when they ask why their last name doesn't match mine. Maybe when they look up who their father was. When that day comes, I want them to know that I stood up. Too late. But I stood up. The red light went off. The interview went viral in under 3 hours. The backlash was brutal. Some said I was performing. Others said it was a PR stunt. But none of that mattered. Because one comment stood out among thousands. It was anonymous. Just 7 words. He finally said what I couldn't. And then a message came through from a private account. One sentence. They want to see you. I read the message 4 times before I let myself believe it was real. They want to see you. No signature. No explanation. Just that. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even breathe properly for the first few minutes. I sat still, my phone burning in my hand like it had transformed into something alive. I didn't know if they meant the twins or Isabel or both. I didn't know if it meant for 5 minutes or 5 seconds. I didn't care. I just knew I'd show up. Anywhere. Anytime. No questions. The location came 2 hours later. The City Botanical Garden. Private courtyard. Sunday. 3 p.m. I arrived 30 minutes early, wearing the only collared shirt I hadn't ruined with grief. The woman at the gate handed me a visitor badge and directed me to the north lawn, past the glass conservatory and the fountain. I felt like I was walking into a dream, or maybe a courtroom. Every step was a negotiation with myself. Don't expect too much, don't read into it, don't fall apart again. And then I saw them. At first, it was just Isabel. She was sitting on a bench beneath a flowering tree I couldn't name, hands folded in her lap, no makeup, no walls. She looked tired in a way that went beyond sleep, but she smiled. And that smile was the softest invitation I'd ever been offered. Next to her sat May and Ellis. They were bigger now. I expected that. But nothing prepared me for the way they looked at the sky. Curious, fearless, alive. Isabel nodded once, just slightly. I walked toward them. My knees felt like rubber. My lungs forgot machinery. I was ready for rejection. Ready for silence. Ready for, you can sit for a minute, but then you'll need to go. What I wasn't ready for was May standing up. She walked toward me on unsure legs, hair in a messy braid, one hand holding a crayon. She stopped just 2 feet away and stared up at me. Then she asked, "Are you the man from the TV?" I dropped to one knee, voice barely holding together. "I am. My name's Clark. I'm your..." Before I could finish, she nodded and said, "We drew you." She turned and pointed to Ellis, who was now pulling something from Isabel's bag. It was a drawing. Crayon, folded, creased. 2 kids. 1 woman. 1 man standing nearby with a balloon. Above it, in shaky handwriting, "Our dad. He's not gone." That's when I cried. Not the theatrical kind. Not the red carpet breakdown. Just quiet, grateful tears. The kind that come when your soul remembers what it feels like to be forgiven. I sat on the bench beside them. Isabel didn't speak for a while. Neither did I. There was nothing to fix in that moment. Nothing to promise. Just a presence. A start. Eventually, Isabel leaned toward me and said softly, "I don't know what this will look like, Clark. I don't know how far we can walk together." I nodded. "I'll walk any distance you'll let me, even if I only get to watch from the edge." She looked at me. "No anger. No diving. Just truth. We start here, with this moment. And if it's the only one we get, it's already more than I expected." We sat there for over an hour, talking, laughing a little, watching the kids chase butterflies and blow on dandelions. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like their father. Not perfect, not repaired, but present. And that was enough.